Most men campaign for attention. They posture, they sell themselves, they beg to be seen. But the Sigma, he doesn't chase. He doesn't shout. He doesn't even extend his hand. And still without lifting a finger, he bends the world around him. His influence is like a ghost's handshake, invisible, undeniable, haunting. He doesn't demand loyalty, but people feel pulled toward him. He doesn't argue, but his silence rattles nerves. He doesn't even notice half the people obsessed with him, yet their every move bends in reaction to his existence. He isn't playing chess with the world. He simply removes himself from the board, and suddenly every piece moves differently. His power isn't in chasing recognition, it's in rewriting the game without ever playing it. In this video, we will break down 10 truths about why Sigmas influence even the people they ignore, and why this invisible gravity makes them the most dangerous kind of presence. 1. His indifference is interpreted as judgment. Silence often feels heavier than condemnation. He doesn't clap for mediocrity, doesn't hand out pity nods, doesn't fake smiles to smooth social gears. In a world addicted to approval, his indifference lands like a public sentence. People unravel, not because he said something cruel, but because he offered nothing at all. That silence becomes a mirror they can't dodge. Every insecurity surfaces, every hunger for recognition sharpens into panic. He never intended to judge, but his refusal to acknowledge feels like a blade sharper than insult. And that's why his lack of reaction often detonates louder than the noisiest speech in the room. 2. His absence alters dynamics more than presence. Sometimes the chair left empty changes the room more than the one filled. When he doesn't show up, the atmosphere doesn't just shift, it collapses. Conversations stumble into awkward pauses, energy drains like a leaking battery, and balance fractures like glass under stress. He never raises a hand to prove his worth, because his absence alone screams it louder than any speech ever could. Most men chase applause and validation to convince themselves they matter. He measures his importance in the silence that unsettles people when he's missing. His withdrawal isn't passive, it's a strategic fracture, like ripping the keystone from an arch and watching the entire structure strain to stay upright. In those cracks, everyone finally realizes the truth. He was never just another part of the system. He was the weight keeping the whole thing from collapsing. 3. He becomes the benchmark others secretly compete against. They call him irrelevant, yet he's the standard they can't stop measuring against. He doesn't compete, but others can't help competing with him. They mock his detachment, question his independence, dismiss his distance while secretly measuring their worth against his example. Every ignored handshake becomes a private war for the other man. Why didn't he acknowledge me? Why doesn't he play the game? His refusal to engage plants silent rivalries. Even haters orbit his gravity, shaping their identity in reaction to his. He never declared himself the benchmark, yet that's exactly what he becomes. 4. He exposes dependencies simply by not sharing it. The one who doesn't need what everyone else begs for makes them question their own chains. Most men live chained to approval, to tradition, to credit, to roles. But his refusal to wear those chains exposes just how enslaved they are. He doesn't lecture. He doesn't mock. He simply lives free of the things they thought were inescapable. And that quiet defiance burns deeper than confrontation because it forces them to face their dependence. He doesn't need to shame them. They shame themselves when standing in his shadow. 5. His refusal to play ends the game entirely. What happens when the only piece that mattered refuses to move? Politics, gossip, control the group feeds on petty battles, but he doesn't feed it. He doesn't flatter egos, doesn't trade favors, doesn't beg for scraps. He just leaves. And when he does, the scaffolding holding it all together buckles under its own emptiness. A game only works when everyone agrees to play. Without him, victories feel hollow, rules look like nonsense, and power struggles collapse into parody. He didn't win and he didn't lose, he erased the board itself. That's his real checkmate, starving the illusion until it chokes on its own irrelevance. 6. His detachment creates obsession in the power-hungry. What they can't control, they can't stop thinking about. Manipulators and controllers thrive on predictable reactions. They survive on buttons they can push, strings they can pull. But when he refuses to react, their entire playbook disintegrates in their hands. His calm, his detachment, it leaves them pacing the floor at night, restless, frustrated, consumed. The more he ignores, the more their desperation spikes. The more he resists, the more they spiral, burning themselves out in pursuit of control they'll never have. He doesn't haunt them with arguments or counterattacks, he haunts them with silence, with absence, with the black hole of attention denied. And here's the cruel twist. The harder they try to erase him from their minds, the deeper his shadow burns in their memory. In trying to prove he doesn't matter, they make him unforgettable. 7. His shadow breaks the illusion of group unity. The outsider who doesn't join forces everyone to ask why they joined in the first place. Groups survive on conformity. They thrive on the illusion that everyone belongs, that loyalty equals identity. But when he refuses to blend in, those illusions splinter like glass under pressure. Even when ignored, his shadow tilts the room. His very distance forces people to confront questions they'd rather bury. Am I here because I chose this or because I'm afraid to be outside it? Am I truly loyal or just obedient in costume? He doesn't throw stones at the group. He doesn't rant or rebel. He simply stands apart, and that act alone makes their unity look fragile, hollow, and dependent on the lie that everyone is happy to be there. 8. His self-sufficiency forces others to see their emptiness. The man who builds alone exposes those who never built at all. He doesn't beg for handouts or depend on applause. He builds quietly, independently, piece by piece. And in doing so, he becomes a mirror to others' hollow foundations. They see his independence and feel their own dependence. They see his structure and realize they've built nothing of their own. He doesn't shame them, but their resentment grows anyway, because nothing cuts deeper than realizing the life you parade around would collapse without scaffolding he never needed. 9. His legacy haunts the forgettable. Some men fade when their names are erased. Others live on because their impact can't be deleted. He doesn't grind for applause, he builds for permanence. While others burn themselves out chasing trends, likes, and clout that vanish like smoke, he lays down foundations that outlast their noise. His work humiliates those who lived only for quick recognition, because when their moment fades, his legacy still stands like stone. He never begs to be remembered, yet he always outlasts the ones who screamed for it. His ghost's handshake lingers in systems, in structures, in minds long after he's gone. He doesn't need to be visible to be unforgettable. He's carved so deep into the world that even denial can't erase him. 10. His ignoring becomes his loudest influence. You don't control the man who doesn't even acknowledge you. His final weapon isn't argument, it's absence. What he refuses to notice becomes exactly what can't stop noticing him. The more he withholds attention, the more that denial burrows into people's minds like a splinter they can't remove. His detachment festers into obsession. His silence becomes the loudest noise echoing in their heads, long after he's gone. He never plotted to influence anyone, yet they orbit him anyway, haunted, irritated, addicted to the void he leaves behind. They can't move on because he never gave them the one thing they begged for, acknowledgement. And that's why he wins without lifting a finger, because his refusal carries more gravity than their loudest demand. On a final note, a ghost doesn't knock. It lingers. And so does the man who never asked to stay. The Sigma doesn't lead with noise. He doesn't fight for recognition. His influence is quiet, haunting, and permanent. He leaves handprints without touching, changes rooms without speaking, and lives rent-free in minds he doesn't even notice. That's why his presence is feared. That's why his absence is heavier than most men's existence. He doesn't ask to matter. He simply does.